What if I told you that the organization that claims to have the truth has been caught changing its most foundational doctrine multiple times? The teaching about who gets to go to heaven. The doctrine that separates Jehovah's Witnesses from pretty much every other Christian religion has been quietly rewritten so many times it'll make your head spin. You ready? Let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and problematic doctrines in Watchtower history, the teaching about the 144,000 and the heavenly calling. I grew up hearing about this my whole life, but what I didn't know was how drastically this teaching has changed over the decades and how those changes reveal a pattern of making things up as they go along. If you're not familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses, here's the basic idea. They believe that only 144,000 people throughout all of human history will go to heaven to rule with Jesus. Everyone else who's saved, the other sheep, will live forever on paradise earth. And if you're wondering where I fit into all this, I was born and raised a witness. My family goes back a couple of generations in the truth. I pioneered, served as a ministerial servant, the whole 9 yards. But the more I researched our history and doctrines, well, that's why I'm making this video. So let's start at the beginning with Charles Taze Russell, the founder of what would eventually become the Jehovah's Witnesses. Back in the 1870s, Russell taught that only 144,000 would go to heaven. But, and this is crucial, he believed true Christians were divided into two heavenly classes. There was the 144,000 royal priesthood who would rule with Christ, and then a secondary great company who would also go to heaven, but on a lesser plane. That's right, Russell never taught that most people would live on earth. He taught that all true Christians had a heavenly hope, either as part of the elite 144,000 or as part of this secondary heavenly class. You can find this in his book, The New Creation, the sixth volume of Studies in the Scriptures published in 1904. In it, he explains that Revelation 7 refers to two heavenly classes. Now, here's something that might blow your mind if you grew up as a witness. Everyone who claimed to be a Christian back then was encouraged to partake of the bread and wine at the memorial. There wasn't this weird situation we have today where only a tiny fraction partake while everyone else just passes the emblems and watches them go by. After Russell died in 1916, Joseph Judge Rutherford, he wasn't really a judge, took control of the organization. And let me tell you, Rutherford was not shy about changing doctrines. Under his leadership, the expectations remained strong that the completion of the body of Christ in heaven was imminent. The Watchtower in 1918 even reported that their convention might be the last in this vicinity before the great convention beyond the veil. They were expected to be whisked away to heaven any day. But when that didn't happen, Rutherford needed to explain why. So in 1922, he introduced a major doctrinal change. He declared that 1918 was actually when Christ had entered the temple for judgment. And that reinterpretation let him save face and claim that their prophetic framework was still correct, just slightly misunderstood. But the real dramatic change came in 1935. At a convention in Washington, D.C., Rutherford completely redefined who the great crowd of Revelation 7:9 was. Remember, Russell had taught this was a secondary heavenly class, but Rutherford now declared it was an earthly class. The eyewitness accounts of the convention are fascinating. Rutherford gave a talk on the Great Multitude, which is what they called it back then, and at the climax he asked, "Will all those who have the hope of living forever on the earth please stand?" According to the reports, over half the audience stood up. Then Rutherford dramatically declared, "Behold, the great multitude." And just like that, with a wave of his hand, Rutherford created a two-class system of witnesses that persists to this day. Some with a heavenly hope, most with an earthly one. And what's crazy is you can read this exact account in their own literature. The August 15th, 1935 Watchtower described it And later publications like the June 1st, 2001 Watchtower recalled it as this amazing moment of new light. But think about what this actually means. Rutherford essentially said, up until today, we believed all true Christians go to heaven, but starting right now, only a small number have that hope. The rest of you have an earthly hope. It was a complete arbitrary cutoff point with zero biblical basis. And guess what? The audience just accepted it. That day alone, 840 new witnesses were baptized, and according to the Watchtower, most of these professing to be of the great crowd. Talk about your peer pressure. Imagine being at that convention and not standing up when Rutherford asked who had an earthly hope. You'd probably look like an arrogant jerk claiming to be one of the special heavenly class. But after 1935, the teaching solidified into what many older witnesses still believe today, that the selection of the 144,000 was essentially completed in 1935. Anyone baptized after that date was automatically assumed to be of the other sheep class with an earthly hope. The organization was actually very explicit about this timeline. The February 15th, 1982 Watchtower said, "For 19 centuries there was only one calling, the heavenly one. In time, the prescribed but limited number of 144,000 would be reached. After this, no more would be anointed by Holy Spirit as witness that they had the heavenly hope, unless in a rare occurrence the unfaithfulness of one of the remaining chosen ones made a replacement necessary." The 1981 Yearbook of Jehovah's Witnesses claimed, "Only as to memorial partakers has there been a gradual decline, which is in accord with scriptural expectations." In other words, as the pre 1935 anointed ones died off, the number of people partaking of the bread and wine at the memorial should steadily decrease. And for a while, that is exactly what happened. But here's where it gets really interesting. By the early 2000s, something unexpected started to happen. The number of memorial partakers stopped declining and started to increase. And this created a serious problem for the organization. According to their own doctrine, practically everyone from the 1935 group should be dead. So why were more people claiming to be anointed? Well, the 2007 yearbook reported an increase of 334 partakers from the previous year. Think about that. 72 years after the door was supposedly closed in 1935. Even if a person was baptized as a teenager then, they'd be in their mid-80s by 2007. There shouldn't be many left, let alone an increase. And this put the governing body in panic mode. They needed to explain this trend without admitting their previous teaching was completely made up. So in the May 1st, '07 Watchtower, they quietly dropped the 1935 doctrine altogether. The article stated, "Thus, it appears that we cannot set a specific date for when the calling of Christians to the heavenly hope ends." Wait, what? After teaching for over 70 years that 1935 was the cutoff point, they just casually mentioned, "Oh, actually, we can't set a specific date." No acknowledgement of the previous error, no apology, just moving the goalposts and expecting everyone to go along with it. And here's some irony for you. At least a few members of the current governing body weren't even born then. Jeffrey Jackson for sure, born in 1955, Mark Sanderson in 1965, and then the two new guys also. How could they be part of the pre-1935 anointed class when they didn't even exist yet? Well, the organization would probably say that they're replacements for unfaithful and anointed ones who lost their heavenly calling. How convenient. Well, since that '07 change, the number of memorial partakers has continued to increase dramatically. In 1935, there were over 52,000 partakers. That number went down to about 8,500 in 2005. But last year, that number was up over 23,000. That's a huge increase that completely contradicts their previous understanding. And rather than honestly addressing the discrepancy, the organization has started questioning the mental stability of anyone who claimed to be anointed. The August 15, 2011 Watchtower suggested the increase might be due to, quote, "a number of factors, including past religious beliefs or even mental or emotional imbalance." Yikes. Imagine claiming to be anointed than being told you're mentally imbalanced. Well, they doubled down on that in January of 2016 in the Watchtower, stating, "The number of partakers includes those who mistakenly think that they are anointed. Others may have mental or emotional problems that lead them to believe that they will rule with Christ in heaven." Not exactly a charitable view of your fellow believers, is it? But here's what strikes me as the height of the hypocrisy in all this. Jesus explicitly commanded his followers to partake of the bread and the wine in remembrance of him. In Luke 22, verse 19 and 20, Jesus said, "Keep doing this in remembrance of me." In Matthew 26:27, he said, "Drink out of it, all of you." The Apostle Paul confirmed this in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 23 through 26, saying that as often as you eat this loaf and drink this cup, you keep proclaiming the death of the Lord. There's absolutely nothing in the Bible that suggests only a small subset of Christians should partake while everyone else watches, regardless of what their calling is. This bizarre practice is entirely a Watchtower invention based on a series of doctrinal changes and reinterpretations that have no scriptural basis whatsoever. Another thing that fascinates me is how the governing body has gradually seized more and more power through these doctrinal changes. Originally, the faithful and discreet slave was understood to be all anointed Christians collectively. But in 2012, they changed this to refer only to the governing body. So now they've positioned themselves as the sole channel of God's communication with mankind. And they did it by redefining who the anointed class even is. The governing body doesn't seek advice or approval from other anointed witnesses. They used to, but they don't now. Those memorial partakers who aren't part of the leadership have no special role or voice in the organization, despite supposedly being kings and priests in waiting. It's almost as if the status of anointed only matters if you're in the inner circle of power. Now let's step back and think about what all this really means. The Watchtower has repeatedly changed its teaching on the most fundamental aspects of its theology: who gets to go to heaven and who doesn't. They set an arbitrary cutoff date in 1935, stuck with it for over 70 years, and then quietly abandoned it when the evidence contradicted their teaching. And through it all, they've expected complete loyalty and obedience from witnesses who are told that this organization alone has the truth. I spent decades believing these teachings, sitting at memorials watching a couple of elderly brothers or sisters partake, usually only one or two, while everyone else just passed the emblems. I never questioned why this practice was so different from what Jesus actually commanded. I never wondered why the number of partakers was going up when our doctrine said it should be going down. I just accepted what I was told, like everyone else. But once you start pulling on that thread, the whole tapestry of Watchtower doctrine just falls apart. It all unravels. If they could be so wrong about something this fundamental, what else might they be wrong about? If they can change major doctrines without acknowledging their previous errors, how can anyone trust that the current teachings won't also be discarded in the future? In fact, the track record shows they likely will. Now, I'm not trying to tell anyone what to believe. I'm just sharing the facts about how this doctrine has evolved over time, backed up by the organization's own publications. Go look it up yourself. I'm not making this stuff up. And I think every witness deserves to know the full truth about the religion's history and how its teachings have changed. So if you're a witness watching this, I get it. It might be uncomfortable. It's probably very uncomfortable. I've been where you are. All I'm asking is that you research your own religion's history with the same critical thinking that you apply to every other religion. Ask yourself, would God's organization need to repeatedly change its teachings about something as important as who goes to heaven? For those of you who've already left the organization, I hope this helps you make sense of what you were taught and why it never quite added up. You're not crazy for questioning these things. The inconsistencies are real. And for everyone else, I hope this gives you some insight into how high control groups, cults, can change their doctrines while maintaining the illusion of consistency and divine guidance. It's a fascinating case study in how religious authority works. Well, that's it for today's video. As always, thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. Leave your comments below to let me know what you think of any of the Watchtower doctrines that you find to be highly questionable. And until next time, take care of yourselves, keep thinking critically, and I'll catch you in the next video.